based upon that, we would then be able to make a list of people who were contacts, and we would follow those contacts for Ebola.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and today we are going to talk about people living with disabilities and how this is affecting them. Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, Honorable Denita Gatti was not able to join us, but Senator Isaac Mwaura will be joining me in this discussion to actually talk about the challenges, what the government can actually do to make it better. He has been instrumental in making donations to those who are vulnerable in his area of jurisdiction and people living with disabilities, and we would like to pick his mind on what can be done. And also yours, tell us, has the government adequately addressed the needs of people living with disabilities as we try to stem the spread of COVID-19? Has the government adequately addressed the needs of people living with COVID-19 with disabilities as we try to address and stem the spread of COVID-19? Tell us what you think. We'll be sampling your views as the show goes along. I'm at Trix Ingado. Michael is at Michael G. Gitonga. The official hashtag is KTN Morning Express. But for now, let's get to it. Welcome to the show, Honorable Isaac Mwaura. Good morning, Senator Mwaura.
Thank you very much, Trixia. Good morning, good morning. I'm very happy to hear from you.
So,
hello?
Hello, I can hear you right now.
Okay.
There's a bit of a delay, but I would like to get right into it. What, in your view, is the status of how the government has handled the needs of the people living with disabilities as we try to control the spread of COVID-19? Has the government done enough, in your view?
See, to begin with, persons with disabilities are really suffering a lot when it comes to COVID-19 because the measures that have been put in place ab initio did not really consider them. To begin with, when the briefings were being done, there was no sign language interpreter, just to show how that had an impact on people who are deaf in terms of communication. In fact, why not for the fact that we have resident sign language interpreters, Kenya sign language interpreters on TVs, such as KTN, then it would have been difficult for them to get information. That's number one. Number two, when you talk about social distancing, it's very difficult for a person with disability who requires assistance to maintain, for example, you are totally blind and you need to be guided, then somebody must hold your hand to move around, see? If you are a wheelchair user, the same case. And then there are those who have, what we call developmental or severe disabilities, like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, autism. They require 24-hour care. So you can imagine a situation where you are talking about social distancing. That is nearly impossible when it comes to persons with disabilities. And so the rate of infection has been very high in terms of the risk itself, rather than the rate. So that is one of the things that we need to look at. Then number three is the issue of livelihoods. Now, and these livelihoods, you have to look at them in two ways.
Right.
I've been visiting persons with disabilities in their homesteads to support them during this COVID-19 as an individual, as a senator for persons with disabilities. And the stories that I've been hearing have been heartrending. For example, I met a mother in Kikuyu, a young lady who has a child who has autism, but she has to go and fend for the family. She has to lock out the child, lock in the child in her house. And I found that little boy there. And you cannot really blame her. And you remember, this is not just somebody. She's already in the government program where she gets the money every end of the month, 2,000 shillings or so. And then also I met another one, a gentleman who sells, vegetables, potatoes. And he was telling me how he is not able to get customers. And so it has actually been difficult for him. Sometimes he's had even to go home having not sold anything for quite some time. So the livelihoods of people with disabilities have been affected. Those who sell in town, sweets and all of that, the small scale, the traders, small traders, they have not been able to get to eke out a living. And so it's become extremely difficult for them, more maybe than others, because by the end of the day, they are more vulnerable than the general population.
Right, and Honorable Maura, when we even talk about the amenities, social amenities that are put up, for example, there were taps put around Nairobi at some point. When you look at the way they are set up, it seems like persons living with disabilities are the last thing on the minds of those who design or put in place certain structures. For example, the taps, they're so high up. Suppose one would be wheelchair bound and would want to wash their hands. That would be quite difficult, or at the very least extremely messy. So is it a question of a lack of representation, or what is the gap in between when these things are put in place and the knowledge that there are people in our society who live with us every day who need to be catered for?
Yeah, Trixie, the challenge is a conceptual design issue.
Right.
Because when there is a calamity or pandemic such as this, if you look at Article 11 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it speaks about that in situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies, the first persons should be evacuated or assisted should be persons with disabilities because they are more vulnerable. But then, let me give you a case in point. I went to visit persons with disabilities in Githurai, for example, and I met a man called Muturi. Muturi doesn't have hands. So when you are talking about how people should wash hands, and you have Muturi there, people with disabilities have not actually been factored in because some of them don't have hands. So I have Muturi there, I have Masharia, in the other side of Kamakis, I have Kenyanjui on the other side, I have Nandutu. There are people, really, you find that when we are talking about these things, they are not really properly thought out. So it's a conceptual design issue, to the extent that even when you're talking about where do you find the water, where do you find the soap, where do you find the sanitizer? It's a serious challenge. And as I told you earlier on, when you talk about sanitizing, for example, if then you have to work with persons with disabilities, somebody on a wheelchair will require that you also sanitize, for example, the handles, of the wheelchair, you see. So that means that they require more sanitizers because you wouldn't then use soap all the time than the average person. Has that actually come to them? Not at all, Trixie. In fact, I've been lobbying that we should have a lot of that. And yesterday, I collected a huge consignment of the same, and I'll be distributing, to persons with disabilities in my locality. I wish there would be a nationwide, strategy under the National Council for Persons with Disabilities to ensure that people with disabilities are given priority when it comes to garment sanitizers. So such kind of things. And also, you saw His Excellency the President talking about 500 million shillings as arrears for those with severe disabilities. Again, this is money that have not been disbursed to persons, to households that have children with severe disabilities for quite some time, see. So already they were affected in terms of their economic status. And that is now something that then has to be looked into, even within the purview of the 10 billion, or rather the 8.5 billion, that is being released through the chiefs, you see. Has there been proper targeting of persons with disabilities? I must say some of these ideas, we have actually championed them without talking much. But then you look at the model of reaching out to persons with disabilities, it's not very well thought out. My take would have been the government would have already used two forms of data to reach out to persons with disabilities. There's an elaborate mechanism of registering persons with disabilities, most of them who live below the poverty line, under the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Most of us, or a good number of us, have got a disability ID card. And so it is actually possible to target, because if you go by the statistics from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, persons with disabilities were estimated to be 918,000 Trixie in this country. So it's very easy to target them at the family household level and provide for them the stipend, the weekly stipend that is supposed to be disbursed by government, so that then you could cushion vulnerable, families and households during this COVID-19. But that has not happened. Instead, what we are seeing is the government not using its own data, Trixie, to actually roll out this program. For example, we have 12.143 million households in the whole country. And it's very easy to therefore target with the 918,000 people who declare themselves as having a disability or another, to target those households very easily. And you are able now to meet the most vulnerable, because you see the burden of care that I've seen when I've gone into people's homes.
Right.
Around here in Kiambu County. Yesterday, I was giving people with albinism, food. At my office at KICC, people are suffering and they're coming all the way. In fact, some of them are even refugees from Congo. Wow. It's actually possible to target them and actually have an intervention that is, that is assured that it is actually not missing who you want to reach out to.
Yes, Senator, but then the question then would be, why isn't this happening? Because we have leaders such as yourself that are quite in government, that are quite passionate and vocal about these issues. How come this is not happening and at the speed that it should be right now?
I think there was a panic kind of thing when the COVID-19 was declared and there was cessation of movement and staying at home. So we have not really had a concerted effort of people meeting to think through issues, It's only now that you can see people are starting to get the confidence that then we can, walk through, we can survive this pandemic, and people are now becoming more emboldened to continue their daily lives. There was a lull, actually,
right.
And on the part of the executive in terms of engagement, you see. We also saw a situation where even Parliament, actually,
Our apologies for that technical hitch. We shall be trying to get back Senator Mwaura once we fix that. But of course, this is a big problem right here in the country for people living with disabilities, as the Senator has rightly elaborated for us. And just to remind you of the Twitter poll question that we are asking you this morning: has the government adequately addressed the needs of people living with disabilities in its strategy to deal with COVID-19? And your response have been coming in since earlier on in the morning. We have our Wanda Samuel Estika, who says no, not even in normal times. Always refreshing to wake up to to the show. Very sober interviews. Thank you very much there, Awada. And then we have Hilary Kimutai saying this has not been majored factored in. I think that's what he means to say, in despite having been a very necessary thing. And then we have Ronnie Reagan saying the systems have failed successfully, and guess what? We are completely finished and finished completely. Look at the living standards. Many people are rendered jobless in government. Then we have Jacob Aberam Matlala, who says, good question. Absolutely, they haven't. Only they have touched on the ordinary people. They haven't seen main ministry. I haven't seen main ministry speaking about them, more so when they are caught outside during the curfew limitations. When they're caught outside after the curfew time and assistance is needed, let them be included. That's a very nice thing that you have pointed out. And then Wamuyu Mushiris is saying, I think the government was not ready for the virus. They were caught, they thought COVID-19 is just a passing cloud. Keep your views coming in and we'll be sampling them and making you a part of the show. But for now, we've gotten the Senator back, and of course, I'd like to bring to his attention that view by one of our viewers that even when it comes to curfew times, people living with disabilities are not, considered, and obviously they need more assistance. And when it comes to beating the curfew, it's a matter of speed sometimes. So what is your take on the fact that they were left out in terms of the element of those essential services, or the people who are exempt from certain rules owing to some of the difficulties they might be facing?
Yeah, thank you very much, Trixie. I think the first thing that we need to agree is that in future, interventions and going forward within this COVID-19 regime is to ensure that persons with disabilities are actually, factored in the planning. We should have had the National Council for Persons with Disabilities represented in the National Response Committee. Right. So that some of these concerns will already be inbuilt in the response. Yes. But I must say that for me, as Mwaura, have been trying to actually provide solutions through the consultation that we've been having, especially around the economy. That is something it's good I bring to the limelight. I've been engaging constructively with the powers that be to ensure that then we have these interventions like the ones that are already put in place. But Trixie, it's good to also highlight two issues that have come out in this pandemic. Number one is that, for example, persons with disabilities are exempted from paying tax up to 150,000 shillings, those who are in gainful employment. But we have seen a situation where teachers with disabilities, their salaries for March were deducted the pay as you were, you see? And this is contrary to even the directive by His Excellency the President to even reduce the pay as you earn from 30 to 25%. So instead of actually getting more relief, by an additional 5%, we have seen the Teacher Service Commission deducting money from them, and they have become even more vulnerable around this COVID-19. Some of them have even collapsed, in banks. Like there's a teacher who collapsed at a bank in Kisumu because she went to look for her money, her salary. She found the balance was zero because you see now she had already planned her salary. And these thousands of teachers have been affected. I have raised the matter in Parliament last week. And we are following up with the TSC. And my take is that they should not only be able to reinstate the exemption as per the law, the Persons with Disabilities Act, but also, Trixie, they should be able to refund the monies that they illegally and lawfully deducted in March for the March salary. Number two is that persons with albinism are being called Corona. It's really funny. Persons with albinism are being called Corona because of people imagining that COVID-19 is a white person's disease, and thereby, by extension, assuming people who look like myself are the ones transmitting the virus. And I think I really want to strongly condemn this in the strongest of terms. When I met people with albinism yesterday, they complained about that a lot. And it is really unfair to stigmatize individuals who are already disadvantaged by the very existing stigma in society. I think this is a time we need to ensure that we embrace one another. And for those who are also stigmatizing those who have COVID-19 already, thank God we've not had anyone with disability. I have not had anybody coming on to share. Maybe they have, but they have not declared. Is that please don't stigmatize people, because by the end of the day, Trixie, one could be the next. You could be the next who will have COVID-19. Do you want actually to be treated the same way? Another point that also I would want to raise is the fact that the cost of living has not gone down because of COVID-19. It has actually gone up. So persons with disabilities cannot get out of their home because even if now the social distancing within the public transport system, which is usually largely inaccessible, the fact that the seats to be occupied are fewer means that the fare has been hiked. And that means that then it's actually more expensive. When it comes to food, actually, we've not seen a translation of the reduction of the VAT from 16 to 14% at the shelf level for fast-moving goods, translating into reduced, cost of living. And that is why I'm actually calling for the UNGA, Trixie. During campaign times, UNGA was 90 bob, Now it is between 130 and 150. Can we have UNGA coming back to 90 shillings or less? Because the government is increasing the importation of maize by 2 million bags. That would give us about 80 million, 80 million new 2 kg bags of maize. And that is actually adequate to feed Kenyans in totality for about 4 or 5 days. But then can that be used over and above the local production to reduce the cost of maize flour from 130, 150 to less than 90 shillings? Because most people cannot actually afford. And this is a staple food for this country, including those with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Senator Isaac Mwaura, for your sentiments. And they're quite helpful in pointing out some of the solutions that could be implemented. Continue with your good work. And obviously, hopefully, government will be able to implement some of the requests that you have made. But for now, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Morning Express.